Hey everyone, and welcome back for another episode of The Journey. In this episode, you're going to learn the strategies behind being an effective leader. You will learn how effective leaders make decisions, how effective leaders achieve their desired results, and how you can become an effective leader in your own life. With these techniques, you'll be able to find the answers you need when you need them. So let's get into it. Effective leadership is built on three principles: values, perspective, and perception. These three components play critical roles in how decisions are made and how we handle the outcomes. Well, you may ask yourself, what is leadership? Leadership is the ability of an individual or a group of people to influence and guide followers or members of an organization, society, or team. And I have good news. This definition can and should be applied to how we manage and ultimately lead our lives. Now ask yourself, have you been leading your life? Do we have the power to influence our own lives? The answer is yes. You've been leading your life, and you do have the power to influence it. We are influenced constantly by our external environment, and for the most part, we lean heavily on our five senses to understand what's happening around us and making decisions based on those perceptions. Generally, we tend to perceive only a small portion of the environment we encounter. We are perceiving mainly what our eyes see, what our ears hear, what our noses smell, what our body touches, and what our tongues can taste. We rarely lean on our higher faculties of intuition, imagination, reason, will, and memory to shape how we see things. Our perception determines our perspective of what is happening. So let's talk a little bit about perspective and perception, as there are important conclusions to be made from these aspects of thought. Perspective, a way of thinking about and understanding something, such as a particular issue or life in general, whereas perception is how we make sense of our environment in response to environmental stimuli. If you were to see a strange person walking a bank with a mask on, you would perceive a threat. To perceive the threat, one has to have a perception about life where it is understood that people have the potential to be dangerous. Our values are being used to understand the environment around us, as taking something from someone else is morally wrong to those that value honesty. Therefore, we would leave the perceived hostile environment for a safer place. So by understanding the link between your perception, perspective, and values, you can then begin to make better decisions in your life. While perceiving our surroundings, we go beyond the objective information available to us by using our perception. Our perception or belief of what is affected by our values, needs, and emotions. Therefore, if what we perceive is a manifestation of how we make sense of our environment and our perspective, how we think about things and ultimately see the world, is guided by our values, then you must conclude that our values are a key component to molding our perspective and perception of the environment. Humans are driven by their perspective, which is used to make decisions. This is why a company or organization will have a list of values that the company stands by and expects their leaders and employees to adhere to these values as well. This requirement cultivates a shared perspective, which then creates an environment for multiple people to meet one goal by making similar decisions. How we see situations and therefore react to them is a direct indication of our values, emotions, and needs. When we can get a handle on our emotions and understand our needs more fully, then we can truly examine our values. Well, you may say, what are values in the most basic sense? Values are a person's principles or standards of behavior, followed up with actions and intent. A set of moral ideas performed to achieve a goal. When we think of values, we tend to think of ideas like integrity, right? The quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness, or accountability, where one is required or expected to justify actions or decisions, or even courage, the ability to feel and recognize fear and move forward regardless of that feeling. But values are more than just a list of ideas. For a person to truly believe in their values, they must perform those tasks. One must act out their values. The actions you take are the indications of what you truly value. In other words, you can't just go around telling people what you value when your performance shows otherwise. You can't say you value integrity and honesty when you lie. You can't say you value courage when you stagnate because of fear. You cannot say you value accountability and you don't acknowledge the role you played in the failed situation. Leading effectively requires that values be examined and re-examined and re-examined. It's never ending. The reason for this process is that in order to meet the never-ending challenges of every situation, you must have the ability to modify or change your values. Well, you're going to say, hey, Jimmy, how does someone change what they value? The first step is introspection. Introspection, the examination or observation of one's own mental and emotional processes, or what we call looking within. So values are built through mental and emotional processes, which then indicates that by changing these mental and emotional processes, you can achieve a more accurate perception and perspective of your environment and ultimately who you are. So the first step in any emotional or mental change is accountability, being required to justify actions and or decisions, identifying the part of the character that is actively playing against our best interests. Are you aggressive when things don't go your way? Were you passive when you needed to be firm? These decisions and actions have to be justified. Why are you behaving that way? Accountability is not an easy feat, but it must be used if any change is to occur. You can't and will not change anything you believe to be acceptable. Without introspection, you can't even see your flaws, and without accountability, you can't change them. Effective leaders take accountability for the person they are and reconcile those facts which played a role in guiding them to poor decisions. The constant repetition of introspection or looking within, coupled with accountability, creates this intuitive art of self-inquiry, constantly looking inside of themselves to seek out the parts of themselves that require maintenance, thereby transforming values and beliefs into calculated action. This is how change occurs. But more so, this is how change in your life occurs. For example, when I landed my first leadership position, I had no idea of who I needed to be until I arrived and started performing the job. Soon, I realized I was too nice. In other words, I had really soft boundaries. This stemmed from the ways in which I experienced weak or uneducated leadership, where mistakes were handled from a place of blame, control, and unaccountability. I was performing my role from this perspective of what not to do and had no idea what to do. Being a quality assurance supervisor for a plasma donation center, I was the oversight for all activities taking place in the center. I was responsible for ensuring tasks were being completed according to the standard operating procedures, which were mandated by governmental agencies. The place could get shut down if something was going on outside of these procedures. If someone made a mistake, there was an entire process that had to be followed, which included penalizing employees. I didn't want anyone to get in trouble. I felt as though I could protect everyone from making mistakes and therefore from getting penalized. which only caused me to work more hours and have far less satisfaction in the role than I thought I would get. Ultimately, I realized that I needed to change. I needed to set stricter boundaries on what I was willing to accept from the staff as well as from myself. I had to do some real soul searching or introspection. I identified that I didn't understand human motivations well and that people will take advantage of you if you train them to. So what I did was I pulled back and set firm boundaries, which at times included penalization. I was able to identify that I was taking on responsibility that didn't belong to me due to my flawed perspective and perception of the situation. I was also able to cultivate a more cohesive team because I was able to clearly communicate what I needed to change as I thought about the bad decisions I made and how it negatively impacted me and the team. The decision I made changed the way I perform my job and ultimately changed the outcome of the decisions I made. My job satisfaction went through the roof. I was finally a quality assurance supervisor at the top of my game because I was willing to see a flawed aspect of my character. So, decisions are the building blocks to outcomes, right? A number of decisions combined leads to an outcome. Decisions are made from our perspectives, our perceptions, and our values. By changing or modifying our values, our perspective and perception changes, and we make different decisions impacting our outcomes. So, who's ready to get some new, better, exciting outcomes? If you said I am, then let's start today, because we all have the ability to influence and guide ourselves by examining, evaluating, and changing our perspectives, perceptions, and values, ultimately leading our lives in the direction of our highest desires. But change takes courage. That ability to feel and acknowledge fear and move forward anyway. Some decisions will be easy, but some will be hard, really hard, especially if what is changing has been cultivated over a long period of time. But it is possible. I believe that the most crucial time to change is in the defining moment. Defining moments are moments in which we act out our values and ultimately display our character. The decisions made in this arena will define who you truly are. The act of cultivating the desired perspective, perception, and values that lend themselves to effective leadership is referred to as building character. Character is built through defining moments. Those moments where you find yourself at a crossroad, when you want to snap, but you know you shouldn't, when you want to give up, but you know you should keep going. The actions you take in these moments define who you are to you and those around you. Therefore, effective leaders pause at the crossroads, dive deep into themselves to find the answers they need, and then have the courage to act them out in accordance with their values. So whether you're building a strong character or a weak character, nonetheless, you're building one. So choose wisely. Requiring that children do chores builds character by illuminating the need for cleanliness, consistency, and more importantly, the ability to achieve a desired result outside of your current level of comfort. It allows children to model a healthy standard by which to achieve a goal, or completing tasks that are unrelated to your current job function in order to show you've built the skills necessary to attain the desired results expected in that higher position you want. These are defining moments that actively lend themselves to character development. Now, after defining the terms in which to attain effective leadership qualities, we're faced with the facts that not everyone, in fact, very few, have built their character in a way that results in desired outcomes. Some may ask, well, why didn't I get the position I interviewed for? Or why is it that my business hasn't taken off yet? It's due to a lack somewhere in a person's character. a deficiency in values, perspective, and or perception. How can you find this lack in character? You can find it through introspection, the examination or observation of one's own mental and emotional processes. By evaluating the reasons for arriving at an undesired outcome, and by taking accountability for the flaws identified within one's own self. The top leaders state that this is a constant routine to look within oneself and be accountable for the results and outcomes of decisions made, to always undergo some form of self-evaluation. In order to accurately perform this task, there has to be a very high level of accountability. The drive to want to get it right, to want to understand oneself on a more truthful and intimate level. The ability to reason is the power of the mind to think, understand, and form judgments by a process of logic. Your ability to reason strengthens your ability to judge your own character, and by default, someone else's character. Your emotions are indicators to evaluate, not indicators of what actions to take. Your ability to strengthen your character depends on your ability to understand your emotions, to understand that decisions should always be made from a level head or a place of sound reasoning or logic. So, the lack of accountability is where I believe we all fall short of being able to build our character to in turn effectively lead our lives and the lives of others. Moreover, when interpreting our own behavior, we suffer from self-serving bias. This is the tendency to attribute our failures to the situation, to what someone else did, to the circumstances, while attributing our success to internal causes. Because, well, let's be honest, accountability for less desirable outcomes stings and doesn't feel good performing at first. Although with consistency, the sting dwindles and the need for accountability strengthens as your results become more favorable. We gladly take accountability for the favorable outcomes and hide our hands when faced with the less desirable ones. Self-accountability is the most important aspect to leadership, which is the most important aspect to leading your life. Let's not wish for less problems. Instead, let's ask for more skills. We all know challenges will arise, which we can't control, although we can control how we react to them. And that reaction can be tailored with more skills, more introspection, more accountability, and less blame or finger pointing. Let's stop asking for accountability from others before we ask it of ourselves. Let's stop acting out values we don't desire. Let's start building our character to meet the demands of life by evaluating our true selves, which are tucked away in those defining moments. By acknowledging and changing our leadership qualities, changing our values, we can then begin to have the most impact on our lives. By leading your life to a desirable destination, you then can influence and guide those around you to lead their lives to more desirable destinations. So, until next time, thanks for joining me, and I love you guys.